Okay, everybody, here's a review video for the next exam that is coming up. Know each position on these ideologies that we have here. Know what classical liberalism is. Remember, classical liberalism is that John Locke theory that showed that, maybe we should have a laissez-faire type of economics, kind of relating off of Adam Smith's thoughts about the invisible hand theory. We were entitled to life, liberty, and property, and we have to have as small a government as possible, and you need an independent arbitrator to come out and resolve any disputes. So make sure you know that. Know what modern liberalism, especially merit-based thought. So what that merit-based thought means is that, sometimes modern liberals will think we should be treated based off of merit, and if we're acting properly, then the government really has no need to intrude on our lives through a wiretap or through searches or anything like that. And modern liberalism also focuses on equality before the law, equality under the Constitution, equality in the workplace, all of that. So know what conservatism is. Modern conservatism, where you adhere to those traditional values, slow incremental change, or an adherence to God, and in some instances remaining isolationist in a conflict. Know what libertarian is, and simply libertarianism is you're socially liberal and economically conservative. So you may be okay with same-sex marriage, but you may want the budget to be balanced. So just kind of keep an eye out on that. Know what fascism is, and kind of the way fascism treats women, or how fascism treats minorities, where there's kind of a nationalistic point of view, and people are in a sense sometimes asked to compromise their values for the betterment of the country. Neoconservatism, this is that George W. Bush type ideology, where it's the United States' responsibility to impose democratic values across the world. Okay, going to the progressive era, know what the spoil system is. Remember, before the progressive era, a lot of jobs were given based off of patronage. So you support me when I run for mayor, and when I win, I give you a job, but then you also got to kick back 10% of your salary to me. Know what laissez-faire economics is, and how that is that, like I mentioned earlier with John Locke, how it is that hands-off the economy, where you let the economy guide itself, and very little, if no, government intervention at all. Kind of Adam Smith type thought. Know what Tony Roosevelt's domestic policy was, especially the Square Deal. A Square Deal was put into place to kind of curb a lot of abuses that corporations were doing against their employees and also against the environment. So the Square Deal was Roosevelt's domestic program, and he wanted, to conserve natural resources, to control those corporations, and to protect the consumer. And we still see effects of that today with things like the Elkins Act, the Elkins Act was an act that imposed heavy fines on railroads that offered rebates, and upon the shippers that accepted those rebates. Know what the Elkins Act is. That's the Elkins Act. Know what the Sherman Act is. Remember, the Sherman Act was a thing that gave the federal government the power to institute proceedings against trusts to dissolve them. It outlawed monopolies and conspiracies to start a monopoly. Know what the Meat Inspection and Pure and Food Drug Act is. It was put into place to help, misbranded meat and people selling spoiled meat are dangerous drugs to the public. Know the Progressive Era amendments, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th. The 16th Amendment focused on the federal income tax. It gave the government the opportunity to tax our income. The 17th Amendment gave the government, or actually gave the people the right to elect their own senators as opposed to the state governments, state legislatures before. The 18th Amendment, which prohibited alcohol, and the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. Know the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty and how the Panama Canal was developed. Remember, the Panama Canal was, in a sense, used to kind of, put a lack of better terms, a shortcut between East Coast and West Coast, and instead of having to sail all the way around South America, you could cut through Panama in the Panama Canal to get on to the West Coast from the East Coast. Know what the Platt Amendment was and how the Platt Amendment stipulated, like, there was conditions for the withdrawal of U.S. troops in Cuba, and it outlined the role of the United States' role in Cuba and the Caribbean, and it limited Cuba's rights to make treaties with other nations and restricted Cuba's ability to conduct foreign policy. Know what the Roosevelt corollary is? Basically, that it was used to protect U.S. interests and try to encourage stability in Latin America by preventing countries from Europe from getting involved. Okay, for interest groups, know what PACs are. What do they do? And who do they contribute to? Remember, anytime we have a PAC is a political action committee, and they kind of act sometimes as a bank for an interest group, where you get contributions into that committee, and you lobby members of Congress out of that fund for that's used by that committee. Usually, they will support incumbents more, because remember, incumbents will win about 90% of the time. So PACs kind of act as a pseudo bank, so to speak, because an interest group will fund a PAC. Also, PACs can take private contributions, individual contributions, and then they can give money to members of Congress or candidates, but usually they'll fund incumbents because incumbents will win about 90% of the time. The next two are kind of tied in. Know what access is, and why do former members of Congress become lobbyists? And they have an advantage. These lobbyists will have an advantage because they already have personal contacts with other members of Congress. And, the lobbyists who are the best are the ones that have that access, and it means they have direct communication between decision makers. And that is something that can't be stated enough, that that's a very key thing to do for lobbyists to have, and it is the fact that they can call up a member of Congress they may know personally. They know their chief of staff. They know how their office works, so they should be able to get in contact with them right away if there's some type of interest coming up. And usually former members of Congress will become lobbyists because they have this direct access, and they also, have a chance of making a lot more money. Also know what a super PAC is. Super PACs are these interest groups or these political action committees that they can spend as much money as they want to either support a candidate or to oppose a candidate, to support an issue or oppose an issue, as long as they aren't receiving direction from that candidate. This evolves out of a case called Citizens United. And basically what Citizens United said is that you can't restrict corporations or labor unions from spending money, because then you're violating their free speech. But kind of going to number 5, we have regulations on how much money we can contribute as an individual. Remember, it's $2,900 per candidate per election. So while super PACs can spend unlimited amounts of money, we as citizens can only spend what is denoted by the Federal Elections Commission. And that's part of the regulatory requirement that comes out of the McCain-Feingold Act or the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. You can use those names interchangeably. But also some of the regulatory requirements for PACs or interest groups is they have to be able to say who they're getting their money from, and it has to be reported. And most of these PACs come from corporations, right? But they have to denote who is giving money, and it just has to be a paper trail, right? And a lot of this activity is going to be protected by the First Amendment, all right? So when we talk about who contributes to the Republicans and Democrats, usually lawyers and labor unions will give to the Democrats. Gas, oil, real estate interests, pharmaceutical will give to your Republican parties. Know some ideological interest groups, like pro-choice groups, pro-life groups. Know a little bit about the farmers' rights movement in California, United Farm Workers, started by Cesar Chavez. Know some trade association groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, women's interest groups like NOW, civil rights like the NAACP, LGBTQIA like GLAAD, Equality California. And we talked about the reporting requirements for lobbyists. Remember, they have to report how much money that's being spent. Okay, so for World War I, know the causes of World War I. Archduke Franz Ferdinand being assassinated kind of set off a chain of events that started World War I. Know about the countries involved. Know pacifism in World War I and how originally that the United States wanted to stay isolationist. No civil liberties threatened by the Sedition Act. Remember, it made it a crime to speak out against the government and to cast the government in a negative light. Know what war boards were and their functions. Know what the Zimmerman telegram was and how the Zimmerman telegram was an intercepted cable that kind of like tried to provoke a war between the United States and Mexico. Know Wilson's 14 points, just in general and what they spoke of. You don't have to know every single one of them. And know that the Treaty of Versailles established the League of Nations, which consequently the United States didn't join at the time. I think I skipped Wilsonianism. No, that is derived from kind of a view that we had to, use some type of liberal internationalism that kind of captured a large segment of intellectuals before and during the war. And it interpreted war as essentially, kind of associated with authoritarian monarchy, aristocracy, imperialism, and economic nationalism. And as Wilson's, foreign policy advice. And how it emphasized self-determination of people, spreading capitalism, supporting collective security. And, it was a little bit against isolationism, but, it kind of still looked at forms of diplomacy as well. Okay, elections, votings, and parties. So remember that people don't vote on candidates' stances on a policy. That's what the book calls a myth of the policy-oriented voter. Usually people vote retrospectively or based off of a candidate's image, so people might like a person's charm, ability to speak, attractiveness. People will sometimes vote on policy, but it's not active, where maybe if somebody is pro-choice, you might vote against them because of that. No realignment and de-alignment. We talked about that in one of our discussions. Realignment is when a demographic group realigns themselves from one party to another. In the announcement section, I made an argument about the Catholic vote. And de-alignment, I think, is what we're seeing is really common. Let me say that again. So de-alignment is when a person detaches themselves from a party and does not attach themselves to another party. They become an independent. So realignment is what I was just talking about, but de-alignment is when someone comes out of a party and then they remain independent. Know what the responsible party system means. Remember that party cannot hold direct means in holding their public officials responsible for not carrying out their policies. Know that to win elections, you have to appeal to the median voter. So that is a situation where you have to move yourself along the ideological spectrum in order to appeal to the candidates in the middle. Appeal to the voters in the middle. So each candidate has to move themselves along the ideological spectrum to appeal to the voters in the middle. Know the third parties in our system, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is probably the most successful. And generally, the Libertarian Party really cannot make much gains nationally, as they are lacking ballot access. Remember, they're only in about 33 states here in the U.S. So they're only on about 33 ballots here in the U.S. Know the participation rates in elections. Presidential election, you can see anywhere from 60 to 70, and that's actually considered to be good. Midterms are going to be roughly half of that, so about 30 to 35. Know what single member districts are. House of Representative members are voted on the single member districts. Remember, our country is carved up into 435 districts, and we elect a representative in each district based off of population. Know what direct elections are and how direct elections kind of influence us, how when we vote for the Senate, we directly elect our senators. Know what democratic primaries and the concept of delegates and superdelegates and how Bernie Sanders had some difficulties. Remember, superdelegates are those 714 Democrats that are appointed to participate in the primary, and they have a say in who is going to be nominated for president. We went over 15. No 16. Know the demographics of Democrats. Generally women are going to be more Democrats than Republican. People of color are generally going to be more Democrats than Republican, and generally, usually kind of that white Anglo Protestant male will be Republican. Know what nativists are? Nativists are those that are kind of maybe back in the time, anti-Chinese, anti-Mexican, anti-Italian, anti-Irish throughout history. Know that the Dixiecrats kind of split off from the New Deal Democrats because of their stances on civil rights. And know New Deal Democrats on how that was kind of the start of what we know as the Democrats today. Know who gives money to Democrats? We kind of talked about that in interest groups. It's going to be lawyers, Hollywood, and voters who are voting Republican are generally going to give money to Republicans, like oil and gas, real estate, and so on. Know that more younger people are going to be Democrat than older people, like I said, people of color, gender as well. We talked a little bit about that. Also know the factions that are within the Republican Party. We have, maybe the mainstream Republicans, and we have the MAGA movement, and then we also have what's called the Freedom Caucus. Those are all kind of factions of the Republican Party. Know what issues get most TV coverage when we talk about media? It's those news stories that are salacious. We like bad news. And remember, some functions of socialization in media is that they tell us what to do. They tell us what the important problems are, and they set the agenda, which is probably the biggest power that they have. And know what that socialization, interpretation, and agenda setting mean. They kind of show us what the problem is. They kind of tell us how to feel, and they're the ones that decide what issues come out and what issues are held back. Why does the media broadcast sex stories of candidates? A lot of people think it's a good judge of somebody's moral character. And know what the Sullivan Rule and how the Sullivan Rule makes it really, really difficult for people to sue for slander or libel. Just because the standard of proof is so high, you have to be able to prove that your reputation has been damaged. And that's a very, very hard thing to be able to do. Okay, so that's what I got. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. All right, thanks a lot.